Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to this presentation. It's a kind of continuation for the first session that I did maybe a month ago. And I just wanted to highlight very important elements to the idea of parenting due to the fact that we have been witnessing a lot of changing or changes in our society. So, and this is actually due to the impact or the influence of Western culture and also the impact of social media. So, oops. Well, some even, okay, here you go. So we're going to navigate modern challenges with Islamic principles. So would like to start with a dua. First of all, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all or this gathering and guide us to raise our generation with the best manners and wisdom. Ameen. And we should not forget our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We should mention them all the time. We should make dua for them all the time. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease it up for them and grant them victory. Now, as we said last time, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He grants us children, they're supposed to be amana. And our responsibility is to make sure that we are playing an important role in protecting their faith and guiding them to the truth and making sure that, their hearts are full with iman, not false ideas. Now, whether we like it or not, there is so much influence happening around us due to social media, the use of technology, and also sometimes, from the surroundings that these children tend to encounter. And if we don't pay attention to these details, we might lose a lot of these kids, and it will be very late for us to rectify or change the situation. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is I'm going to share with you some scenarios. Okay, some of them are real, some of them are just based on my understanding for different concepts that we want to discuss today. So, so I'm going to give you one example for a kid, and then the other one is for a teenager. Okay, and then I will ask you to tell me what is the concept that we're talking about here. And then after that, we're going to talk about what is the Islamic perspective on this concept and how we handle these scenarios. So this is the first concept that we want to discuss. So I want you to have a look at this first scenario for a child, and then we have another one for a teenager. Just read them. Okay. So the first scenario for the child is basically about a 9-year-old son playing with his block game, which is a gift from the family. And then his sister came in order to ask for engagement in this kind of game. So the son refused to let her play, and he started saying, "This is mine. I don't want you to touch it and leave me alone. And I don't need you, or I don't need anybody," when he was called for dinner. This is for the kid. The teenager example is about somebody who is, or a daughter who's 18 years old. After high school, one day she came to the family announcing that, she doesn't want to live with the family anymore because there are a lot of restrictions and she doesn't have any kind of freedom and she wants to leave. Okay. So in terms of a concept, what kind of a concept we are talking about here? You can shout, if you want to say something. What kind of concept we are talking about here? What is the phenomenon we're talking about here?
Dependence, you mean?
Dependence or what? Independence?
Dependence. What do
Oh,
you mean by
so I'm talking about when you read these two scenarios, okay, what comes to your mind in terms of what is happening in these two scenarios? What is the
rebellion?
concept? Yeah, uh-huh.
Rebellion?
Maybe, uh-huh. There's so much about me, okay? So we're talking about what?
Individuality?
Exactly. So this is a form of extreme individualism. Now, some people might argue and say, we don't have this in Oman, but we are seeing a lot of evidence nowadays that kids are changing or starting to adopt such a behavior. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of statistics recorded by an official entity here in Oman. But I will try to bring to you some examples from countries that they tend to record such um, cases. Of course, this is a very Western concept where people, when they get to act or behave, they always think about themselves. Okay, they prioritize their personal desires over anything else, family, community, people around them. Okay, it's all about me. Okay, so for example, in the US, this is a study which shows that about 85% or 58% of the US adults report that they have a lot of this feeling being what lonely and socially isolated. And when they ask about why, and they discover that, they focused a lot on themselves, and this is why they are left out, okay, due to the impact of what living their own life without, interacting with other people. And about 40% of this US adults believe that family obligations tend to interfere with their personal dreams and happiness and freedom to do things. So they think always having obligations toward other people is an issue. And this is why they don't like to have this kind of restriction um, from the family. Okay, so they don't want to do anything for their family members. And in some similar contexts, for example, I was able to find this study about Turkey, where about 23% of youth, they believe that, they need to give more priority to personal freedom over any family obligation. So they said, we want to live our own lives. Okay. We don't want to have any kind of restrictions. They don't want to live with their families. Okay. And the same thing, they tend to, if they are giving a choice to live by themselves and stay away from the family, about 28% now in Turkey, for example, tend to feel that, and then this is actually in 2018, which means maybe now the percentage has gone up. So there is a lot of influence by the Western culture in terms of living by yourself and leaving any kind of obligations towards the family and the community. And this is very dangerous. And by the way, because I'm an educator and I teach in a college, and I can see that the kids who are moving to Muscat nowadays, they tend to stay longer in the capital area and stop going back to their families because they feel that they can do more here independently. Okay. So sometimes I talk to my students and I tell them, are you going home this weekend? And they say, no, we're staying here because we can do whatever we want. And this is a very dangerous sign that people started to feel more towards what is important to me more than what is important to the family. And I think we need to be very careful. And back to these, scenarios, and before, we go to the scenarios, we wanted to emphasize here the Islamic perspective about the idea of individualism. Of course, Islam promotes independence and but at the same time, we have this collective responsibility towards people who we care for. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that lower to them the wing of humility out of mercy. And so, and you know why? Because they were taking care of us when we were what? Kids. So, um, and then there is another prophetic, tradition by the Prophet Muhammad where he was talking about the idea of we need to be like a team, like a building, one building that support each other. But by having this attitude of, it's all about me, we are going to fulfill these principles, these beautiful principles in Islam. Why? Because we all the time think about ourselves. And this has actually started to invade our society, our beautiful society, where we are known for solidarity, talking to each other, supporting each other. Like, I remember when I was a kid, in our village, we used to do things together, not only at a family level, but at the whole village level. So, for example, I don't know if you know this, but at the time of harvest, when the palm trees are harvest, we as a community we go like in groups to support, one family that is doing the harvest that day. This does not exist anymore. Okay. In fact, now, you'll find a lot of people tend to do things in isolation without informing other families to get that kind of support. So this is very dangerous. Now, let's go back to these scenarios. What do you think we should do in the first scenario for the kid and for the teenager?
Dr. Ahmed,
Yes.
can I interject a little bit?
Sure, sure.
I think individuality is one of the main characteristics of modernity.
Yes.
And this modernity is Western modernity. We have
Correct.
adopted it, but it's not our modernity. It's not built on our worldview, on Islamic worldview or Islamic thinking, Islamic culture, Islamic values. It is a Western. And the Western modernity, it came about in opposition to religion. Therefore, it is taught in the West children to be, from the beginning, to be individual. So individuality for them is a value. So the problem is when we adopt this modernity and we're just taking it without without being selective, and that's the reason probably in the West the family is limited to just the immediate family, parents and siblings, as opposed to us we have extended family. And it's not. I think the issue is not just with parent, but also with the community, as you say, with the community. So Islam, it does have individuality in terms of everyone mukallaf, but we have faraid that faraid فريضة عين وفي كفاية. There is something that the community is responsible. فرض الكفاية وفرض عين. And therefore, how do we find a balance between being being individual as well as being a community? End of the day, we will be called as an individual in terms of responsibility, but here we have to find a balance.
Very true. Beautiful, Sheikh Hafid. And I think, we have bought into this idea that, usually what comes from the West I'm not trying to criticize, the West as a negative world all the time, but there are a lot of equalities, if we can call them equalities, or let's say principles or ways of thinking that have been adopted by a lot of Muslims, unfortunately, and affecting our life, miserably nowadays. And unfortunately, people look at them as a sign of being civilized, being more modern. And this thinking has messed up the whole idea of, as you said, Sheikh Hafid, what is actually related to our Islamic principles and what is actually related to the Western concept. And we need to have this better understanding of what is actually clashing with our values as Muslims. So we have to have a better understanding of our values, first of all, before adopting something from outside. So thank you so much, Sheikh Hafid. Now let's go back to this, the scenarios that we had before. Okay, the kid and the teenager. What do you think we should do in order to handle each of these situations for the kid and for the teenager? Any thought?
Probably the 9-year-old is easier because you need to teach him how to share, and that there is a teamwork. Maybe with the teamwork, you can do things faster. You can do, accomplish more. You can have different ideas.
Mhm.
And even during play, I mean, with Lego especially, I mean, it's possible. The teenager, I'm not sure.
Okay. Anybody want to say something about, the teenager? Okay.
I would think that
Mhm.
parents need to spend more time with their teenagers, especially boys. Maybe when boys should always spend more time with their fathers, and girls should always be with their mothers, so that they will not be exposed to the disease within the society. They will be within their parents always, and they will always be attached to what their parents are doing and what they are following.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. For the kids, as you said, we need to connect calmly. This is one of the things, sometimes we tend to react very quickly. Okay. But first of all, we could what? Connect very calmly with the kids, try to talk to them, listen to them, give them a hug. Then kids always love stories. So tell them about a story about the Prophet Muhammad when he shared his food, the very famous story between the Ansar and also the Muhajirin, where they shared, everything, with their family members. Okay, so to show that sharing is caring. And then, like sometimes there are some, you need to emphasize a lot of these Quranic or Islamic values that we have where we tend to give the people who are in need. So kids like this kind of what modeling all the time. So, and whenever there is an opportunity where you could show them that you care for others, model it for them. This is, will give them a chance to understand the value. And then, of course, when encourage them to do that, and then whenever they do it, try to what? To praise them for that. This is will make them adopt a lot of these values that we should care about others. It's not about me only, but it's all about what? The community and everybody else. Okay. Now for the teenagers, they tend to be rebels. Okay, sometimes they, if you interrupt them, you lose them. So what you need to do, first of all, you need to listen without judgment. Okay, this is number one. Number two, just since they wanted to show you that they have grown, so just tell them, I understand that you want to grow and explore your potentials, and then ask them to reflect, okay? For example, what they want to focus on. Is it something to do with their studies, with their decisions, something to do with budget? So involve them in these kind of what activities. And then also try to explain rights and duties. And in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and your Lord has decreed that you not worship except him and to parents good treatment. So always try to explain this level of respect that the Quran has a place for parents in order to show them that parents are very important elements of our lives and we have to show them respect. And always tell them that Islam is not against being like a dreamer or becoming, like, for example, ambitious, but at the same time, there should be a balance between your personal development and also your obligations towards your family and people around you. And always share good stories and discuss these stories, because a lot of teenagers tend to fade away or run away from you whenever you not try to use some kind of logic. And remember, now with social media, there is so much influence, there's so much education. The education can be negative education. And if you cannot convince them, then they might adopt all these information that they get or pieces of information that they get from social media. Because whether we like it or not, social media is invading every home. And we have to find a way to filter the level of information, the kind of information that they got into our house by having a lot of dialogue with our kids. Of course, like we need to also explain the idea of a freedom, because having a freedom without limitation can lead to a lot of issues, okay? Because then I can cross the boundaries and I can take other people's right. So we need to explain to them what it means to be having a freedom. So real freedom is not about doing whatever you want. It's the choosing to do what is right for Allah, for your family, and for your future. And of course, you need to offer control independence. For example, you can give them some kind of task. If you have a company, maybe you can ask them to be part of that company. If they have to travel, then you have to emphasize the mahram, part. Ask them to volunteer within the Islamic boundaries, of course. And of course, discuss, social support. I think, as Sheikh Hafiz said, the West tends to forget about the importance of social support that you might get from the family. As you remember, I shared some statistics at the beginning about the US, where 58% of adults feel lonely and depressed. And when they found out why, they found out that because they decided to leave their families at early stages, and now they live by their own selves, and this has created a kind of problem for them. So now let's move to the next concept here. Do you have any questions about this, or any addition that you want to add on handling this kind of situation, especially when it comes to individualism? Okay. So let's move to the second concept here. We have also two scenarios. Just have a look and tell me what you think. What kind of a concept we're talking about here? one about a young child, 10 years old. He come after school saying, Mama, my friend said he might become a girl one day. And he said, you can change if you want, if you feel it, like it. Can I also decide what I want to be when I grow up? And is that true in Islam? And for the teenager, you know, like they have a lot of this online, um, activities, spending a lot of time on online, and they come up with this kind of concept of non-binary today. And they said, we should support people to choose whatever they want, if they want to be male or female or whatever. So what kind of concept we are talking about?
LGBTQ.
Exactly. So basically, the liberal views about gender and sexuality, and there's so much happening nowadays about this concept. So basically, you're claiming gender is fluid, and it can be chosen or chosen, and it is separate from the biological what? Sex. So for example, in America, 7.2% of adults, including 20% of Gen Z, identify as what? LGBT, which shows that, there is a lot of what? Move towards this kind of acceptance, towards this idea that you can change your gender. For example, in the UK, 44% of adults between the age of 18 to 24, they believe it's okay for people to choose their gender identity, showing that it's okay for you to have this idea of changing your gender because maybe you are in the wrong body. Okay, so it's okay for you to change your gender. Okay, because you might be on the wrong what body. So in some of the Muslim countries, like Indonesia and Malaysia, for example, in Indonesia, about 9% of youth, they have shown this kind of support for LGBT rights, which shows that, we are moving towards the idea of supporting, people to have this kind of what to change for their gender. And in Malaysia, about 32% of urban youth reported that they know somebody who's already what? Part of what? LGBT community. And we're talking about, these countries where they have a lot of Muslim. Okay, 32 is a lot. And as I said before, we don't have a lot of statistics about Oman and similar context, but this is very common. Okay, like I have seen, at least in some institutions here in Oman, people are very, very uh, clear about changing their identity, I mean, their gender identity in a lot of institutions. So you'll find some girls who act like boys. And this is here in Oman, by the way. I'm talking about Omanis who are actually identify themselves as the opposite gender. A boy as a girl or a girl as a boy, and this is becoming very common in our community. Maybe in the past, you people don't like to go outside and declare this kind of identity, but now it is becoming very clear and obvious to a lot of people, and they feel it is okay and it is fine to share this, and they expect you to give that kind of support. And Islamically speaking, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everybody into two mates, male or female. And also the Prophet Muhammad reminded us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala curses those men who intend to imitate women and vice versa. So these are very clear concepts that we could not, have any kind of doubts. But nowadays, this is becoming a trend. People think that it's okay to shift or to adopt or to support, such initiatives. For example, there's a study in Sweden 2021 indicate that individuals who undergo gender reassignment have increased up to 19 times higher, okay, in terms of societal attempts. So those who are actually changing their gender, okay, they tend to be they attempt to commit suicide 19 times higher than those who are not involved in such, practices, which shows that there's a problem in this one. And if we don't talk about this to our kids and to our students and to our community, we might end up with a community that believe it's okay, and it might be too late to rectify this. So in these two examples, if we think about it for the child, okay, we need first of all to connect with the kids and make sure that, thank you for telling me, because nowadays kids sometimes don't like to share things. And if you don't create this atmosphere of sharing between you and your kid, they might hide a lot of things. And one of them is this support that they might give to this idea. And then teach them Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has created us in the perfect form. And there's no need for change. Okay? This is not about clothes. This is not about, a gift, like something that we can change. No. This is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should value this gift. Now, always kids also like to the analog, analogies, okay? And then I found this, analogy in the internet. Like, for example, when you have a mango seed, it will just give you a mango at the end of the day. It will not give you an orange, okay? And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. Always tell the stories that, it's okay the way you are. And then you can tell them stories about, if they are boys, you can tell them stories about boys in Islam and how they contributed, to the Islamic civilization. Okay, people like Ali radiallahu anh, Osama bin Zayd, and how they have influenced the Islamic civilization in a positive sense. The same thing, you can have characters, for women, okay, in order to show that, it is okay. You should be very proud of who you are. And you don't have to change. Of course, this is something that we have to emphasize a lot. Try to monitor what your kids are watching. Because even now in cartoons, the other day, I remember I was watching a cartoon with my kids. It was a very educational TV kid series. And suddenly, out of the blue, they threw these kind of concepts. They were having like two male parents, okay? And they have kids, okay? Imagine, like you were not around, and the kids will start to feel this is normal. And especially if you're not opening a dialogue with your kids, you don't talk to them, you don't ask them about what they watch, then you might lose them, and they might start to adopt and might be tolerant to these kind of concepts. For the teenager, we need to also, as I said before, we need to listen. We need to discuss the divine wisdom explain why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to emphasize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise and He knows everything, okay, and He doesn't make mistakes. And then you can start sharing these stories about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfected our creation. And He makes it perfect, you know, so it doesn't require any kind of a change. Always share a lot of stories, Quranic verses, hadith, to show this is something that we as a Muslim, okay, we don't believe in. And also you need to explain to them why we don't believe in that. And also, I've noticed that when I talk to my to my students in the school or in college, whenever I give them statistics, studies, okay, to show the consequences of such a phenomenon, they started to believe more. They sometimes, you know, unfortunately, because some families did not emphasize religious values within the household. So we need sometimes to use some examples from the West, from sometimes from our study, from our context, in order to make sure that we're talking to their minds more than their emotions or to their hearts. Of course, emphasize the idea of having role models throughout our Islamic history. This will make sure that, or they will stress the idea that we have good examples of youth in both being males or females who contributed to the Islamic civilization. So they don't need to change. They don't need to be another person. So this is something that we need to also emphasize. I also said that we need to have a safe dialogue space all the time. And also we need to have this kind of not control, but, you know, sort of monitoring system for their social media use. Any questions? Okay.
Maybe I want to add something here.
Sure.
Especially with regards to the concept of probably of LGBTQ or anything else. It's one of the main roles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as men and female is, of course, you know, like for reproduction as well. And, you know, one of the hierarchy of needs for humans is the need of reproduction and leaving a legacy and stuff like that. With modernity, leave alone the LGBTQ concept, people tend to have less and less children already. And because of course, individuality coming into play, the increase in life standard, you know, the cost and everything else, again, people choose also not to have children. With regards to having LGBTQ in the mix, they have come up with, you know, like ways in order to have children, which emphasizes, you know, like which mixes, you know, lineage, genetics, you know, like having, it's becoming a business of having a surrogate mother that, you know, a woman in need, she wants money, so you go and you rent her womb in order to have a baby, and then you give her money, and then that baby becomes detached from the mother. And stuff like that. So reproduction is in a crisis already, you know, without anything else. I was watching a documentary about Mongolia, and you know how Mongolia was like a big empire during Genghis Khan, and then after he died, the empire split. The children, you know, like fought. And with them becoming weak, the influence of Buddhism from India and stuff like that, you know, made them go towards, you know, like becoming more peaceful people and choosing not to fight and stuff. Then came the Chinese dynasty that took 800,000 people from 1 million. There were 1 million population. They took 800,000 of them. And from that time, it's been more than 200 years, I think, or 300 years. They couldn't regain from 200,000. They couldn't regain the population back because a lot of them also still 1 out of 3 men chooses to become a monk. And monk means they don't marry, they don't reproduce. So Mongolia, with it's like, I think it's the 18th largest country in the world, and not having enough population because of issues like this that we, like modernity or other religion also introduced. So we also have to emphasize on the fact that one of the reasons why there is 2 genders is to have reproduction and to continue with this humanity.
Very true.
Civilization.
Thank you so much, Sister Ahlam, for sharing this. I totally agree with you. I have noticed, even now in our communities here in Oman, like there's this tendency, as you said, because of individualism and being modern and being liberal, we tend to delay marriage. We tend to, for example, delay, having kids. We need to control kids and so on. And this will affect, and one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad was praising this ummah for is having kids. Okay. تزاوجوا تناسلوا فإني مباهي بكم الأمم, which means, like, I want you to get married. I want you to have more kids so that, I could be proud, okay, in front of other nations and so on. And this is a very important concept that, if we start to adopt, something like LGBT, we are going to add more to the problem, because now people are late in terms of getting married, and also late in terms of getting kids, and also with this idea that we have LGBT community encouragement and adoption, then of course we will have a reduction in the population. Okay, now let's move to yes, Sheikh Hafa.
Regarding this LGBT thing, or ideology, you can call, in Islam, the idea of 2 genders is actually connected to fitra.
Yes.
So LGBT, so there is I think we need to emphasize that, because LGBT ideology is against the nature of the human being, as well as religion, of course. But it is against the nature of human being. So because there are 4 things in us. There is a biological sex, which is based on our physical body when we were born. And then there is a gender identity, which is how you feel in your mind. And then there is a gender expression, how you show your gender. And then there is a sexual orientation, which is who you are attracted to. Now, in Islam, all these 4 characteristics, they are aligned. But the West, they have made these to be floating.
Yeah.
And they're convincing people that these are floating, and therefore any one of these, you could change it. So I think it's important to emphasize, when you see a girl, for example, taking more interest to present herself like a boy, to start, paying attention, because that's why in Islam, the idea of imitating another gender is not allowed, because these things have to be aligned. These 4 things have to be aligned. Okay.
Sheikh Hafid, I just wanted to take your opinion about something. Now, like we have noticed nowadays, when try to give a piece of advice, to somebody, they always will tell you, please don't interfere with my boundaries or with my freedom. Like, for example, I remember once, I was talking to one of the students who is changing his identity, or she is actually changing her identity now. So I don't know whether I should call her or she or whatever. So, and she was so defensive and she was so angry, and she was, although I wasn't talking to her in public, I took her aside and went to and we started talking about it. And she was so mad, and she told me, if you talk to me about this again, I'm gonna report you, okay? And this is none of your business, okay? Because she identified herself as lesbian or a man or whatever, I don't know, okay? So I don't know how can we do our job as doing, Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, and at the same time, we have all this restriction, that we should not interfere with people's life. So I'm sometimes finding it difficult.
Yeah, then you come back to this idea that is planted in our minds of individuality,
Hmm.
because individuality is also connected to liberalism.
Hmm.
And liberalism, you're talking about freedom, individual freedom, in absolute terms. This is my
Hmm.
body, this is my life, and nobody can say anything about it. I'm
Hmm.
free to do, what I like, all right, to pursue happiness. So it is, because these are all connected. Because if the modernity is putting a lot of you know pressure on
Hmm.
everyone, but on Muslim, because we have our own values.
Hmm.
And people sometimes they take it lightly, because modernity gives us a lot of facilities in terms of good life,
Hmm.
technology, cars,
Materialistically
traveling,
speaking.
so this aspect is good.
Hmm.
But there are many other aspects related to values that the West is pushing a
Hmm.
lot. And some of these ideas, these kids that you're talking about, maybe they pick it up when they were in school, especially with some people, some teachers who believe in this kind of ideas.
Hmm.
All right, because we're not saying every Westerner, because in the West also you have a section of people who are their values are in line with Islamic values. Like those who are conservative, right?
Yes.
Conservative Christians. They are much fighting this in the West, as we are concerned in our societies. So I don't have an answer, direct answer for this, Sheikh. Is not an easy thing, but maybe it require another talk
Yeah.
with consultation with some other people who are in both in psychology, in
Hmm.
religious advice, in
Yeah. Like, before moving to the next, thank you, Sheikh Hafid. I still remember a story, when I was in the US. So one day, my son, who was 5 years old, okay, came back from school with a letter from the school. He was still in KG, okay, KG2. And so he came home with a letter from the school. He said, Father, this is a letter from the school. You have to sign it. And so I opened the letter, okay, and it was a kind of acknowledgement, or from that the school wants every parent to sign, saying that starting from next year, the school will adopt a complete curriculum, okay, stressing LGBT rights. So they're asking parents to be more tolerant and more supportive, for this cause, okay, because they think that this is a minority that they have to take care of, and they want parents to be supportive for such initiative. And I was like, wow, he is only 5, and they want him to start learning about LGBT and how to be tolerant to this community, okay, from such a very young age, because they know the influence that that will have on kids will be more at this stage compared to later stages. So, it's very dangerous sometimes, what is happening in the West. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people here in Oman who are adopting these values and they try to promote for them. And nowadays, this is very common even in these international schools. I've checked, some calendars. I remember checking, a calendar with one of these international schools. They have all these events, and some of these events, they are all about, LGBT community. Okay, so I think parents have to be very careful. It's not only about providing good education, okay, to your kids, but also making sure that your kid is becoming a good Muslim. And I think people are becoming very loose when it comes to raising kids who are Islamically strong. And this is very, very dangerous. I think, we need to be very careful talking to our kids, making sure that we are valuing, our Islamic values and principles by educating our kids, talking to them, making sure that these values are practiced and discussed all the time. Anyway, I don't know if we have time to talk about another concept, but let's see if we can finish this concept. So this is also another set of 2 scenarios. Okay, a 9-year-old son runs up to you after playing in the park and say, with a lot of excitement, "My friend has a girlfriend." He gives her candy and they hold hands during break time. "Can I have a girlfriend too?" And then for the teenager scenario, you have a 17-year-old daughter who spends time watching romantic series and online materials and comes to you one evening and says, "I think dating is important before marriage. And you need to know someone very well first before you get to this marriage, because compatibility is very important." So what concept are we talking about here?
Community.
Dating.
We're talking about dating.
Community.
Okay. Why? Because now, in the first example, we're talking about a girl talking about what? A friend who has a girlfriend. And in the second one, we're talking about somebody who's trying to say it is okay to know somebody in a relationship before you get married to that person in order to know whether you're compatible or not. Now, so we're talking about what? Dating culture. Let's first of all, before we talk about the examples on the data, do you think this is a problem in our Omani community?
Yes.
Okay, so you've seen examples.
And the coffee shops, anytime you go.
Yes, coffee shops,
Yeah, beach, you see them.
You see them around, okay? And it's
Yes.
becoming very popular, okay?
Yes.
So this is that's to show you that we are getting this influence of this dating culture. And by the way, I work for also higher education institution, and I'm seeing this every day. It's and this is back to Sheikh Hafid, to the back to the idea how much you can do in terms of educating these kids about the influence of such a concept. Because I talk about this inside my class, okay? But I cannot sometimes legislate this as a rule, for other classes and for other teachers and so on. So it's a very difficult task, honestly, how we navigate this in our communities. And I think, there should be a lot of rules coming from maybe higher ups to handle such situations. Now, if we look at the US, and I lived in the US, and it was very, very clear, it's, you go to universities, you go, as you said, coffee shops. This is a culture. 65% of adults support living without marriage. They have, they have this kind of, intimate, relationship for years, and they move to another person, and it is normal, okay? For example, in the UK, 72% of young adults between the age of 18 to 24 believe that dating is very important before marriage in order to check, compatibility. And this will also to promote a lot of emotional attachment outside of marriage. So these are examples to show that dating is very common in the West. But unfortunately, this is also happening in our communities, whether it's in Oman or other countries. For example, in Egypt, 15% of youth report having a romantic relationship or friendship, before marriage. For example, even in Western communities where there are some Muslims, for example, in America, when they conducted this study, they found about 31% believe that dating is necessary to truly know a future spouse. And 31% among Muslims is a very high percentage, or a high percentage, that we have to be very careful. And this is a very alarming sign that this is actually happening in our communities. As we know, in Islam, there isn't such a premarital relationships. We try to make it after marriage. Any kind of physical or emotional attachment, this happens after marriage. Okay, so in the Quran, we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, do not approach unlawful sexual intercourse. Indeed, it is ever an immortality, and it is an evil, it's evil as a way. Okay, so, and the Prophet Muhammad, remember, always advises us not to, not to be alone with another woman, or a man with another woman, or a woman with another man alone, because the shaitan will be the third entity there. Like, for example, there was a lecture that I was following also with Sheikh Mufti Menk. Okay, he was saying that dating trains the heart for divorce. You learn to love, break up, move on, because you always have options. It becomes harder to value permanence and forgiveness in marriage, because marriage can be challenging sometimes. But if you have this idea that you can always move from one person to another through dating, and you don't have to worry about, that person, then when that person gets married, what's going to happen? It will be much easier for that person to not to be tolerant for things which are not that big. And it might lead to divorce. Islamic view is always honestly view in terms of we need to ask about the person before we get married. We need to find more information about the person, about the family, and then we put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hoping that this person will be the right person. And we need to pray istikhara, and if it is good for us, it will happen eventually. I found also, I think you should also follow this lady, Dr. Rania Awad. She is a psychologist, American psychologist, a Muslim one. And what I like about her, she likes to connect between psychology and Islamic values. And she was trying to also stress the same fact that Dr. Mufti Mink was saying, that whenever we tend to have this kind of dating culture in our life, what's going to happen is that will lead eventually to a lot of emotional trauma, especially among a lot of ladies, because sometimes this attachment could aspire some people to have a relationship, okay, or a marriage relationship, and if it doesn't end this way, that will affect you psychologically, more with women. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen with men, but it happens more with women in terms of the impact, the negative impact. For example, there was another survey surveyed American Muslims who live in the United States of America, and they found out that 32% of these Muslim or young Muslims having a romantic relationship before marriage, and 60% of them felt guilty, and they have this kind of emotional distress. Why? Because they know this is against our Islamic values. And about 45% said the relationship harmed their relationship with their family and faith practices. So they stop sometimes praying or praying less, hiding things from their parents. So they and then when the parents got to know about this, they get upset with them, and this will affect their relationship with their parents. This is a study conducted by Dr. Qadi and other professors. So now, what should we do in these kind of scenarios, do you think, for the younger child? What should we tell them? What is the right approach to handle a kid telling you that he has a friend who has a girlfriend, and can he have a girlfriend as well? And then you have a teenager who think that dating is very important for before marriage, because it will check whether the person is more compatible or not. How would you handle each of these situations? Any thoughts?
I think probably one of the taboos we have in our cultures as well is to talk about gender, different gender, and the relationship between man and a woman. We leave it very late, and we let other people educate our children with regards to these things, whether it's books, whether it's movies, whether it's YouTube, whatever it is. If parents talk to their kids themselves, they take that initiative of talking to their kids in terms of the difference between gender. And as you said, this is linked to the LGBTQ as well, why created us, why at certain stage it's okay for a girl and a boy to play together, but at some certain stage there are boundaries that these things cannot, continue because things develop, whatever. We as, parents should take that initiative and they start talking about their kids. The problem we have to their kids, sorry. The problem we have is we don't. There are very few parents who talk to their kids from early age about what is a man, what's a woman, what are the roles, We can idealize the responses and say Islamically it's this and Islamically it's that. But the actual thing is what's happening, reality is something else, They can, you can sit there and lecture that child for half an hour. But if they were not taught from the beginning that there are some things that are okay, there are some things that are not okay, they will hear you from one ear and take it out, because the word is not working in that way anymore. And telling them Islam is this, Islam is that. A lot of them are leaving Islam because of they think there are too many rules that are against reality, So I think it's the parents' problem. They should not think about gender or the difference in gender is something bad to talk about. It's not always, no. You have to educate. As you said, you have to educate. Why is it no? Why it's no? Okay, now you can play, but at a certain age, you cannot. Why you cannot? You have to have that dialogue, This is what I think. Even in terms of the girl, you can tell her, oh, Islam, dating is against Islam or blah, blah, blah. But the reality is when she sees that other people get, married in this way, or they get what they want in this way, of course, she will not, everything in reality says otherwise.
Very true. I totally agree with you. And you know what I find it more challenging actually is that when you as a parent try to educate, as you said, your kid about, I like to talk to my kids a lot, okay, about a lot of things, okay? And as soon as they leave you, okay, they go to visit their uncle's houses or their auntie's houses or, somebody else. It's very interesting, how conflicting information that they get outside. So if you don't have this kind of a dialogue and you're willing to listen to your kids, because they will come back and will ask you questions. Today I met, my cousin, and he was saying no. And if you don't, become proactive in terms of asking them, for example, oh, what did you do there? Okay, what did you talk about? And so that you get to know what is happening when you're not around, because we cannot be with our kids sometimes 24/7. They might be in school, they might be in sometimes visiting other family members and so on. So we need to make sure that we are always available to answer their questions and they're willing to talk to us. Because as soon as they feel that you are not willing to listen to them, believe me, as you said, there are a lot of other educators, YouTube, social media, and they can put a lot of poison in their heads, and it will be too late for you as a parent to rectify or to solve the problem. So for the young child, acknowledge the excitement and then explain the why marriage is special. Okay. You can say save special love for marriage. And like you can have this analogy where you talk about, for example, when you have a gift for Eid, don't you wait for the Eid to come so that you can what? Have it open. For example, also, highlight a friendship instead. Teach them to value simple, innocent friendship without romantic and physical elements. Because sometimes, if we don't, as you said, if we don't talk to them about it, because it's a taboo, they might, experience this and they are not ready for it. And then it might be too late, for you as a parent to solve this problem. Of course, you need to monitor media. For a teenager, you have to listen with a lot of respect because they will always try to challenge you. Talk about the idea of real compatibility, because they will tell you, how would you live with somebody that you don't know? But if you emphasize that what you need to have in marriage is a person who is, for example, in our Islamic values, somebody who's with good morals. Okay, as the Prophet, stressed that تنكح المرأة لأربع. But he said that what? We need to focus on the moral side, when we look for a partner. So teach also the beauty of Islamic approach. For example, when you do this kind of a checkup about the family and the girl, and you make sure that you have a better understanding of this person that you want to have this relationship with in marriage, then you will say that look, we never had a lot of divorces in the past, but nowadays, because of this dating culture, everybody is getting divorced. Okay, not everybody, but a lot of people are getting divorced. Why? Because it is not based on caring. Okay, that you want to, it's a time that you want to pass with somebody for a specific time, and then you can move to another person, especially when you have a lot of fish in the sea, and you say, what if she doesn't want to stay with me? I can go to another person, I can go to another person. So when you try to tell them the importance or the beauty of this Islamic approach, they might understand why we do it this way. And of course, we need to share a lot of what? Stories, like the Prophet Moses' stories with the two daughters of the Prophet, and how respect and modesty and that kind of interaction took a place, led to that kind of what? Marriage. And of course, the Prophet, the story between Ali radiallahu anhu and the Fatima, okay, and their marriage was based on modesty, mutual respect, and piety, not dating. So I think if we have this kind of what approach when we talk to our kids, maybe this will what change their views. Of course, we need to emphasize the idea that break, because dating will always encourage break up. This will have a lot of what emotional what risk on the person. And of course, you need to encourage what halal alternatives by making sure that yes, you need to understand people, you need to have a healthy interaction, but with boundaries. And of course, you need to offer the kind of support to these kids whenever they need. I think I will stop here because I have other concepts that I wanted to discuss, but I think because of the time limitation, I'll stop here. Thank you so much for listening and for your contribution.
Thank you, Brother Ahmed. Anyone has any question, comment?
I think, Dr. Ahmed, these scenarios you have shown after they have manifested, I hope parents will be intervening much earlier before they manifest, because we should not wait until we get these surprises. To be parent, you have to take care from cradle to the maturity. Yeah.
Yes, very true, Sheikh Hafiz.
Conclude with a dua.
Yeah, go ahead, sister.
Me?
Yeah.
سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. اللهم اجعل اجتماعنا هذا اجتماعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما، ولا تجعل منا ولا معنا آثما ولا محروما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله صلاة تشقي بها الظالمين بالظالمين وتهلك الكافرين بالكافرين وتخرج المسلمين من بينهم سالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك بأن لك الحمد لا إله إلا أنت المنان بديع السماوات والأرض يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا حي يا قيوم. اللهم انصر أخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان يا الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد.
آمين. جزاك الله خير.